welcome to this week's SDM interview show. This week I sit down with my good friend Margie Analise. Margie is an entrepreneur, and we've known each other on social media for about 10 years. She's pivoted her business and sit down and relax and enjoy the chat where Margie and I talk about entrepreneurship, how she learns, and what changes she's made in her business. And we truly think this might benefit you. So I'm here with my friend Margie today, and what we're going to talk about is Margie's introduction into the entrepreneur world, what she's done, and how she's made a business for herself. Welcome, Margie.
Hey, Rob. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, Margie and I have known each other for a long time. So I think we first met on Twitter probably 8 or 9 years ago, and we've kind of stayed in touch. We talk on Facebook. We often talk one-on-one just to bounce ideas off, which is really, I think, important when you're working at home by yourself and stuff like that. So we hope you enjoyed this, and let's ask Margie and talk to her a little bit about, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, now, where do I begin? Well, back when I was born, no, I'm just kidding. I guess I've been doing my thing for about 9 years, and, I don't think you know that you're an entrepreneur until you take that leap and you find out, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Yes. And it's one of the best things I did. So I'm definitely an entrepreneur at heart. I love helping people figure out their entrepreneurial journey too. So that really pumps me up in life. But I like to have fun. I play the drums, which a lot of people don't know. Didn't say I play them well, but I play them. And I also, I have like a left brain and right brain working simultaneously. So it's an interesting journey.
I bet. And, I know you like to help people. You've always been very helpful. So why did you decide to be an entrepreneur, and when? Like, what kind of led you to that?
Well, it's not like a unicorn rainbow kind of story. Many years ago, right before I started my entrepreneurial journey, one of my sisters was diagnosed with cancer. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I re-examined everything in my life, and I thought, what am I doing? I was, at the time, climbing the corporate ladder, wasn't really finding the fulfillment there that I thought that I would. So I was pretty disillusioned. And then my sister got sick, and I thought, wait a minute. First I wanted to just shake people and say, life is short, do what you love. And I really did. Because that's what I felt in my heart. But that was the catalyst for me saying, you know what, whatever happens, at least I can say that I took a chance on finding out what it is that I love to do and then doing it.
And it's so true that health and family's impact. I know when I went full-time on my own, it'll be 9 years in March. So
wow.
At the end of next month. My dad at the time had cancer, was diagnosed with cancer. My dad had pancreatic cancer, and I basically, when I was packaged out of the job I was in, I was actually glad to be out, because the corporate ladder, as we know, can be no fun. And then I went out on my own, and it's just kind of grown since then. So it's amazing how it's often health of a family or a loved one that causes us to get involved in entrepreneurship, isn't it?
Yeah, more often than I think people realize.
Yeah. It's so true. I was reading, where was an article? I was listening to Arlene Dickinson, who's on Dragon's Den in Canada, which for anybody in the U.S. is the same as Shark Tank, and she was talking about that. And it was health inside her family that caused her. And she was actually a single mom too, so it gave her some flexibility. And I think that's one of the things that many of us, including myself, like about being an entrepreneur, is that flexibility. You got to be dedicated at what you do, but you have a little bit of flexibility on when you do it, how you do it, where you do it, and you're not caught. I don't like to use the word you're not responsible to anybody, because you still have clients, and as far as I'm concerned, you're responsible to your clients, but you have a little bit more where you can adjust a little bit. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think it brings more fulfillment, because I really believe that everybody has something inside of them that they can share with other people and make a living teaching. and sharing and helping people through. So I think it gives a lot of fulfillment, but also that freedom that we crave to manage our own time schedule and to be able to say no to things we don't want to do and yes to the things that we do want to do. So yeah, absolutely.
And where in your business or in a normal corporate business do you get a chance to meet people all over the world? I mean, I only know in my career, which before I got into marketing, only one situation where early in my career we had an office in London, so I got a chance, England, so I got a chance to talk to people from Toronto and London, England. But the friendships and the colleagues I have all over the world from what I do is, to me, one of the most fulfilling parts about doing this, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I think it's been incredible, like you say, for me also, the relationships through social media and people that I've got to meet and I can call friends now would never have happened otherwise.
No, so true. So in your business, what kind of services do you provide? What do you like to do? And frankly, what do you not like to do? I have to ask that.
Well, that's a long list. So let's just focus on what I like to do.
Yeah. What do you like to do?
You know what? I love helping people with branding, number one, because I got it wrong. Like I had a bit of a business background and I thought going online is going to be a piece of cake. And oh my God, I couldn't have been more wrong. And I know how hard it was for me. And so that's what I love to help people with because I struggled with it too. And I know how much other people struggle with it. So figuring out your brand, like who are you? Why should people work with you? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? I think you've got to build your brand before you build your website. So that is, for me, the first piece of the puzzle for people, that they need to really get that down so they can attract the kind of people they love working with from the get-go.
So true. I mean, and you've heard me talk about this book again, and I'll mention it again. One of my favorite books on branding is a book called The Inside Advantage, written by a gentleman by the name of Robert Bloom. It's about 8 or 9 years old at this point, I think. And it's probably the best book I've ever read on branding. And the reason I say that is the quote on the back is discover your business inside advantage and start growing. So what he really focuses on, what makes you different and what gives you your edge on competitors. And something we were talking about before we got on this interview was, let's not keep fighting everything on price, because as far as I'm concerned, fighting price is a end to the bottom and an end to out of business. Look at Payless Shoes in the U.S. right now. I mean, there's a good example, right?
And I tell my clients that, and I put it on social media, you will never be the cheapest. That's not the pond you want to fish in. You want to fish for the people that see the value of what you do, but you have to be able to communicate that. And until you can answer that question, you can't expect other people to understand why they should choose you if you can't answer that question yourself. But I see a lot of people try to throw their website up first and get clients and go into social media, but they have no idea what their messaging is. So they blend in to the sea of sameness, and they also usually end up looking like a cookie cutter because they try to model after other people who have been successful doing what they want to do.
And I think to be honest with you, copying your competitors isn't a good way to attract clients, because they'll just go to the competitor because they've been around longer. So from that standpoint, it's, again, what makes you different? What can you provide? Is it personal service? Is it 24-hour service? Is it service at silly hours? Is it flexibility? I mean, there's a million things. So you just have to find it. And that, I think, is key.
And it's one of the hardest things for people to brand themselves. I think one piece of advice that I could give is, if people are struggling with this, go research some of the great companies that did this, like Domino's Pizza, 30 minutes or less. That's how they branded themselves. And so that's the one example that comes to mind. So how do you stand out? Well, they were selling pizza like everybody else, but they had I guess you could say, an angle on it, a different take on it. And that's what it takes to be able to stand out.
I mean, I just finished listening to an amazing podcast series on a podcast called Business Wars, and it talked about two companies. It was a 7-part, 30-minute series in branding, and one was McDonald's, and the other was Burger King. And it talked about the business war from McDonald's and Burger King going back to the 50s, and what they did in branding to battle it out and they're still battling today.
Yeah.
And it's all about their angle and what they did and how they did it and how they changed with the times. And that's what I think people need to be really aware of, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Branding is everything. If you haven't defined your brand, there's no sense in putting up a website because you're not going to get very much out of it. Like that is the whole key. And I learned it the hard way. Like I made all those mistakes. I looked like a cookie cutter like everybody else, and I didn't stand out. And it takes time to find your own voice, and it takes help.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part is people are tempted, and I've done it, I'm sure you've done it. They're tempted to create a website and make their name their brand. And I personally think making my personal name my brand is the worst thing I ever did. I'll say that. I rebranded my website and my corporate name about 2.5 years ago, and it's probably the best thing I did. And the other reason for doing it is it means there's a succession there. If I ever decide to get out, I can actually sell the brand.
Yeah, and if you have an exit strategy.
I don't have an exit strategy. And I'm not looking to get out. I mean, I'm only 51. I have no problem saying that. And I'd be bored. So, I mean, but you have to have some thought of that. Like, you know, who knows Rob Cairns? Who knows Margie? Who knows? Unless you're Troy Aikman or Dale Jeter or, you know, or Dale Earnhardt Jr. Like, who cares? Like, honestly. You know. It's an interesting discussion. One of the things you and I have talked about for years is website platforms. And I'm going to go here, and this is probably not going to be very popular amongst the WordPress people in my circle, because I tend to commiserate with a pile of WordPress developers because that's what I develop in. But I know you've moved away from WordPress with a lot of your client stuff. How come?
Well, it's a personal decision, right? It's a personal preference. As part of what I do take on some web design clients. I do the branding and design. And so, like I said, I'm a left and right brain person, which probably a lot of entrepreneurs are. So I love the creativity. I need the creativity, and I also need the structure and some strategy. And I started on WordPress. I hated learning it years ago. Hated it because I came from HTML coding. Oh, anybody else cringing out there? And so, you know, I really dug it for a long time. I kind of had it down pat. I knew which themes that I like to work with that were stable. And I, you know, figured out the right host to recommend to my clients that was more secure and that kind of thing, and the plugins that you should have and shouldn't have, all that stuff. That takes a long time to figure out. And what I found with the changes, and after being hacked myself several times, which was extremely discouraging, I almost just threw in the towel, honestly, because you put your heart and soul into making your website, building your brand, and then none of it is usable. Yep. And you just, I don't even know what the word is to describe it, but it was really hard to gain the momentum to get back at it. And I struggled with that for a bit. But I did go back to WordPress. I figured out hosting has a lot to do with it, that kind of thing. But with all that being said, for me, I just find with all of the changes and all of the maintenance that is required behind the scenes to keep your updates or your plugins updated and that kind of thing, a lot of clients, they say they'll do it and they don't do it. And there's just a lot of moving pieces that you always have to keep in mind. So my strategy for moving away from it was, because I don't offer the maintenance after I build a website, for the most part, what I was looking for was a platform that would be very easy for them to use and update on their own, and also one where they didn't have to worry about updates and checking boxes and making sure that things were, you know, always ongoing, because they don't think about those things. So I moved away from WordPress and found a couple of different platforms that I use now. One is more creative and the other is a lot simpler for users on the back end. So
I think what you need to do is do what's right for you. And it's easy for people like WordPress to say, oh, WordPress, we know WordPress right now in the worldwide market is somewhere between $32 and 35% right now, depending on who you talk to, of all CMSs, content management systems out there. I think what people have to be aware of, and it doesn't matter what platform you choose, there's always pitfalls and there's always potential security issues. So I think you got to realize that going to another platform doesn't get rid of the security problems. It doesn't get rid of the hack attempts. It doesn't get rid of any of that. I kind of have a bit of a phrase in my business that says it's no longer if you'll be hacked, it's when, and it's how you recover from that hack. And I do care plans for security, and I tell my clients I will never 100% guarantee you will not be hacked. What I can guarantee is if you are hacked, you can recover within a week. That I will guarantee, but I will not guarantee the other. And it's the old, you know, frankly, Windows versus Apple discussion. Everybody said, oh, Apple has no viruses. And then this past week, they released issues in the iOS store. Last week, there was an issue on the Apple OS that came out. So the point is, when you gain market, and you become big enough, then you just become a target. I mean, that's the nature of the beast, I think.
I agree. Nothing is impervious. You cannot, I mean, as hard as people are working to make insecure, there are also on the other side people working to find ways in. And so I agree with you. We can't look at any one thing and think that it's fully protected and nothing will ever happen. But we have to, I think, make the best choice for us and what we want, what we're looking for, and just know that we need to take steps to ensure that we're doing best practices to keep things as secure as we can.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. And I know from talking to you, one of the platforms you like is Squarespace. And the cool thing with Squarespace, and correct me if I'm wrong, they do not offer email. So, you know, a client would have to go somewhere else with email. And I actually think that's a good option. I am not a big fan for small businesses of going to standard WordPress shared hosting email or web hosting shared email. I'm a big fan of going to something like G Suite, which is Google's email. That's my preferred solution. But if you don't like that, look at Microsoft Outlook. You can pay Microsoft to host your email. I actually know several medium-sized companies that have offices of 20 or 30 people that do not run a mail server. They actually go to either Microsoft or Google and say, host my email for me, we're done with this. And I think that's the one advantage of not going to a standard email, standard hosting platform is you don't have email as an option.
I agree. I moved my email as well because there were just too many problems, too much hacking, or spam, just lots and lots of problems all the time. And that really calmed down once I moved away from the, you know, regular hosting email thing. So yeah, I agree.
I would agree. Now, in projects you've done, do you have a project that you really enjoy doing that stood out for a client?
You know what? I don't, because every time I take on a new project, I think, oh my God, this is the most fun. So, and I think part of that is because it's a new challenge. And I've hopefully by the time each project comes along that I've learned a little bit more, that I've expanded a little bit more so I can offer more and bring more to the table. So honestly, I think that, yeah, it seems like every project I take on, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so much fun. This is the best one ever. And then the next one comes, it's like, oh my God, this is the best one ever. So
yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's we take on projects as entrepreneurs often not for money, but by challenge or by learning ability or by something else. And there's other things that drive us to projects. Like, you know, I'm working on a project right now, and it's all challenge, and it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
And that to me is better for my head than saying, oh, here's a couple, not a couple $1,000 doesn't help, but you know what I mean. That's
yeah, I agree. And for me too, it's all about a fit. Like I don't take on a lot of projects because I like to be able to give good turnaround. I like to have good control. I like to be able to dedicate my time and that creative flow to it rather than being disjointed on a number of different projects. So I really make sure it's a good fit for me before I say yes.
Yeah, and it's always better to underpromise and overdeliver. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's when you get into that mentality, it makes it so much easier.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yep. What's the most challenging thing as being an entrepreneur for you?
Oh, I probably speak for a lot of people out there where it's figuring everything out. Some of the biggest challenges I've had is learning how to set up contracts, right? Learning how to over-deliver but not give everything away for free.
That's right? A big one.
Yeah. It's huge, and I think that we're always learning. There's always some new little thing that you learn with every experience. But I think for me, those for sure. Also, one thing that I'm really starting to work on now in my business and to help people with is finding balance. And I know people hate that word. They don't think there's any such thing. But if you are all business and no life, what good is it? And there's a saying, Dolly Parton quote, actually, that is kind of my new business philosophy because it sums it up really well. And she said, don't get so busy making a living you forget to make a life.
Yeah, so true. I would suggest to anybody that's having a balance problem, especially an entrepreneur, is go look up Tony Robbins, go look at his podcast. He spends more time in his podcast, interestingly enough, talking about relationships and entrepreneurs and people that work at home and how those relationships impact their business decisions. So there is a balance. You just have to find it. And that's the important thing. And his point is, if you're everything from your sex life to your romantic relationship is out of whack at home, guaranteed your business relationships are going to be out of whack as well. And that's kind of his philosophy.
Because we're one. As solopreneurs, our business and us as a person, they're so intertwined. Like there's no you shut your door, walk home from your office and turn it off. It doesn't happen. You're at 3 a.m. in the morning thinking about, I should do this or I should do that. And
yes,
it all flows. What's going on in our emotions, what's going on in our life, what's going on in our business, it all overflows into each other and there's no line of delineation. And the new membership program I'm setting up is to help people figure these things out, like setting better boundaries so that you can start to have more separation and you can start to enjoy your life instead of working 24/7. Because to have a business where you're working 24/7 and missing out on time with family and friends and not taking care of yourself, who wants that? Like, that's not why we got into this.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think part of the problem with this is time management.
Absolutely.
I hate to say it. So, I'm a bit of a productivity junkie. And one thing bit is an understatement. And one of the things I've worked on over the years is trying to perfect my time management system. And I've gone through some changes. I basically use the same system I use today. And kind of the way I manage is everything I do goes into my calendar. And so I take to-do list items and kind of look to them every night and say, okay, what do I need to do tomorrow? I will schedule those in my calendar to be done. All my project stuff, if it needs to be done the next day, goes into my calendar. And I like to leave about 30% kind of free because emergencies come up, phone calls come up, things like that. And then I go one more. I color code all that stuff in my calendar. Now, kind of the way I manage is, the secret is that calendar is not just the business calendar. It's a business, personal, family, whatever. It goes in the same calendar, the same to-do list. And I think where a lot of people get into trouble, especially entrepreneurs, is wife calls up, husband, and says, did you realize John had a soccer game tonight at 6 o'clock? Oh, I have a business appointment at 6:30. I won't be there. The problem is, if you scheduled that in the same calendar, you would realize John had a soccer game at 6 o'clock, and you wouldn't have that problem.
That's a really good point. And I think that you are absolutely right. There's a separation between business and personal life that doesn't exist. That's a carryover from corporate world. And that doesn't work in entrepreneur world. So it's our life and our business are intertwined. And I think you're absolutely right.
I think anybody's having time management issues, frankly should look up a gentleman by the name of Dan Allen and go read a book called Getting Things Done. It's probably one of the best systems I've out there. He's just rewritten the system actually for computerization. It's a manual system, but it's not about it being manual. It's about what's taught in the book. So I think that kind of, he's a good, and I'm just kind of, as we speak, I'm looking at my bookshelf. There's also a really good book called Time Power, written by Brian Tracy, and anybody in the entrepreneur space knows Brian. He's a master sales guy and probably one of the best out there. There's a couple of resources that people can kind of check out to help them.
Yeah. And on that note, I think there's three things people really struggle with. Number one, knowing what the priorities should be. So they're busy doing busy work that's not getting them any return on investment. So again, knowing your brand and knowing what you're going to put out there for sale and focusing on the priority things is number one. Two, setting those boundaries so you don't overwrite your personal life with your business life, etc. And then three, like you say, time management. Then how do I manage these tasks? But knowing what you should be focusing on is critical, and then setting really good boundaries so that you can still have a life and run and grow your business.
No question on that one.
Yeah.
So as we move on, and I've thrown a couple of book resources out there. Do you have any favorite business books or entrepreneur books you like to read? Do you have one of those?
Oh my God, there is one that is my all-time favorite. Nothing has come close. And it's an older book, but it's great. So everybody go get it because it's cheap too. It's called Positioning by Al Ries and Jack Trout.
I know it. Yeah.
Do you know why I love that book? Is for me, I consumed it almost all at one time because it's smart. Like you just want to be in a room with these two guys brainstorming after, because they really, reading that book for me shifted my perspective to understanding how do I stand out against my competitors? How does it work? And so they give lots and lots of real life examples of companies that we're all familiar with, but they explain the underbelly of it. They explain how it works, and it's not complex, but it's a new way of looking at it, and I think a really, really powerful way of looking at it.
Yeah, it is a great book. I don't think books, some are timeless. Like that one's timeless. The Inside Advantage is timeless. There are books, anything by Brian Tracy is pretty well timeless. Tony Robbins is timeless. I think there's books like that that kind of stand the test of time. And then there are some that sort of, there's a really good book. One of my favorite books is a book called To Start With Why. And
I have that, yeah.
Yeah, it talks about why you should do something and showing potential customers the why of things instead of that you should just do it. And one of my favorite examples from that book is to talk about the iPod. And most people don't realize Creative Labs was the first to the table with an MP3 player. And they said, it can hold 5 gigs of songs. And then Apple came out with the iPod and said, folks, you can take 1,000 songs in your pocket on the go. And they've told the customer exactly why they need it. And we know where the history with the iPod is. So, I mean. Yeah,
it's like the positioning. That's how they positioned it in the customer's mind. And it's so powerful. You don't have to be first. You have to get the first mind share.
Yeah, no question about that.
Yeah, that's a great book too. Yeah.
Are you a podcast listener at all? And do you have any favorites?
Not as much as I would like, just because I'm too busy. I'm too busy in my business time. There is one, and it is called, oh my God, what is it called? I can't even think of it. It's by Sean D'Souza. He's the owner of Psychotactics. And he's amazing, and his podcast is very different. He's a smart guy. Super awesome. If you email him, he'll actually write back to you. And he's so knowledgeable. Yeah, very
cool
podcast.
Yeah, it's funny because people all the time say to me, oh, you like podcasts? How many? And I say, it changes. And right now, and I'm just looking, I've got 9, 12, 13. I've got 19 podcasts on my podcast player.
Wow.
Now, most of them are pretty caught up, and only one of them is a non-business podcast, believe it or not.
I do believe it. Yeah, that's what we
They're,
like to learn about.
they're all either WordPress-based, technology-based, business-based, marketing-based.
Mm-hmm.
They're in that kind of realm. And the one that's not, shouldn't surprise most people listening to this, know I'm a sports junkie, is actually the Hockey Night in Canada podcast. Because I have to listen to something to take my mind off. But I tend to repurpose my time a little more. So when I'm working, if I'm working on some mindless graphics, I'll listen to something. If I'm out commuting, I'll listen to something. If I'm out doing something, going for a walk, I'll listen to something. So I tend to, and I have my favorites. I mean, there's no question. So, there's kind. So we all do marketing. Do you have a favorite tool or two that you like for marketing?
Good question. I guess not so much as a favorite, but I definitely do have a recommendation. I switched from putting some of my content from YouTube onto Vimeo, which I think is a smart move because, if you want to be found through your video, as you know, I mean, this is no surprise. If you want to be found, YouTube is the world's second largest search engine.
No question.
Our videos need to be on YouTube, absolutely. But I find when it's more content, more for courses or programs, I decided that there's too much. You know how they always have those suggestions at the bottom and that kind of thing. I don't want people seeing that. I want them to stay focused on what they're paying for and what they want to accomplish. And so I made a switch over to Vimeo. So I guess that's probably been my latest.
Your latest change?
My latest tool and that kind of thing. I think so many of them I just use intuitively that when you ask me to think about it, I'm kind of like, oh my God, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the other thing to add is Vimeo actually has a pro plan. YouTube really frowns on people putting membership content on their site. So you got to be very careful. They get complaints. It's interesting. They don't like sales videos on their site, but everybody's running webinars to YouTube. So it's a bit of a tough go. I think, too, the other place to look for video is Wistia these days. I think Wistia has a lot of power out there for video. But
yeah, and people don't think about that. They usually just put everything on YouTube, and I did that for a long time. And then I thought, you know what, I think it looks more professional, actually. It removes those distractions, and it gives you a place where your content is a little bit more secure. It's off the beaten path a bit, so you can, to me, that's a bit of a value for people that are paying to see that content, especially.
I would agree. And one last question, which I kind of just came up with. What else is new?
I know.
And it was something you and I were talking about, and I was in a very heated discussion with somebody over yesterday. Why do you need a website in today's market? Why can't I just create a Facebook page, a Twitter account, an Instagram account, and say, forget a website and I'm good to go?
Oh, well, my knee-jerk answer to that is you don't own any of that other stuff.
So true.
You can't control what Facebook does. If they change the rules and you've built an audience of 1 million people, that could be wiped out in a split second. I mean, here's how I explain it to my clients. Social media and all those things out there are tools to drive people to your website. Once they go to your website, you want to drive them to your list to build your list. Once you get them on your list, that's the relationship building. Those are your potential clients that want to work with you. So that's how it works. You don't control that outer hemisphere, Facebook and all that stuff. So, and if the people think about it, what's the first thing that you do when you want to check something out? You want to see what a store has to offer, or you go to Google. What do you expect to see? You expect to see a website. If you just see a Facebook page, aren't you like, don't they have a website? I mean, it's funny how as a consumer, we look at these things with the expectation, but when we're in business for ourselves, we're like, well, do I really need that? My answer, absolutely. Until you see the majority of things change over where websites become extinct, which I don't believe will happen at all, because that's your presence on the internet, and there's too many companies making money off of that there will always be there. I think it will change like everything else over time, but for today, we have to deal with what we have today.
I would agree. I would agree with you. I mean, it used to be if you wanted to find a company, I'm going to date myself a little bit.
I know what you're going to say.
We went to the Yellow Pages book. And, and I hate to say it, and I'll use this as an example. Who was the biggest advertiser in Yellow Pages in Toronto? I can tell you. It was all the illicit escort services. And, illegal or not, that's where they advertised. Not the newspaper, not online. And one of the first industries, legal or not, that moved to the internet was the sex industry. And that should tell you something. I mean, that's where people go. I mean, with the demise of payphones because of cell phones, we all have a phone in our hand, now, and we all have a phone within grasp. Nobody goes to the internet. If I want to find something out, I grab my phone, I grab Google, I do a search, and I'm done. And by the way, that's worth mentioning too to our listeners, that if you have a website, it better be mobile optimized and have mobile calls to action on it. One of the things I do now on WordPress sites is on all the bottom of every website I do, there's a call button that only shows up on mobile, because people on mobile are more likely to call you right away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think we're at the stage where 50 to 60% of all searches are being done on mobile right now. And of those, if you're in a retail environment, 37% will walk into a retail store after doing a mobile search. And on restaurants, it's even greater. So, so websites do matter because that's what people are looking for.
Yep. And the thing that connects them when they do go to your website is your brand.
No question. And it all comes back to branding.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
I mean, let's look at, and to mention, what brands come to mind? The two that come to mind every time is Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Nike. And why? There's not much difference between a pair of Nike shoes and a $40 pair of shoes, except it has a Nike brand on it. Really, when you think about it. And you notice how I didn't say Wendy's, and you notice how I didn't say Burger King? Because McDonald's comes to mind right away. Coke comes to mind right away. And that's all branding, and that's what people need to realize. And that's why making branding changes is so hard, because frankly, at the end of the day, branding changes can take a couple of years. They're hard to do. I mean,
they are, and it's a really personal thing, and it's always ongoing. If it's not evolving, something's wrong. One thing I'd like to say to people, sometimes when we hear those big companies, we think, oh my God, I can't compete with those. The thing is that you don't need 100 million people to be in your circle. You want your circle to be more narrow, and just become well known in your own circle, and that will expand over time. So don't worry about hitting the whole world big like Coca-Cola or McDonald's. Just focus on serving the people you really love working with in the best way possible, and just keep honing your brand voice, and then you'll become recognized in your industry, in your sphere. And I think that's the most important thing, that we're not after everybody in the world. We're not selling hamburgers for 35 cents like McDonald's way back when.
I would agree with that. I mean, even take social media. One of the first things on Twitter, when Twitter was new, and I've been on Twitter over 10 years now, was how do I get to 2,000 followers? How do I get to 5,000 followers?
Yeah.
How do I get to 10,000? As you know or don't know, I'm just shy of 20,000. Now, I've plateaued over the last couple of years because, to be honest with you, I haven't really worked at it. And the reason I haven't worked at it is, yes, it provides me some business. Don't disagree. But it's about finding the right people. As a friend of mine who runs a jewelry store will tell you, it's not about the 10 people that walk in. It's the one person with the right amount of money for the right job.
Yes.
And that's what I would kind of say to that is, when you're hunting your personal brand, just realize you're not everything to all people. You will resonate with certain kind of people. And that doesn't make you good or bad. It just means you're attracted to certain type of people.
Yeah, you know what? That is such solid advice, because I think for a lot of people, and this can go on for a long time, is they think they need to appeal to everybody, but it's okay for people to hate you. It's okay for people to go, oh my God, I would never work with them, because you want a reaction. You don't want to be warm, because that is mainstream. You're a wallflower. Nobody's paying attention to you. You're either hot or cold. People love you or they don't love you. And that's when you know you are really defining who you want to work with and who you want to attract.
I just went through that recently. As you know, I do pretty regular. I haven't done any recently, but Facebook Lives, and I'll be back at them next week. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a Facebook Live on a company called EIG, Endurance International Group, which in my business is, to me, the company to stay away from. And I pointed out that EIG also owns a service called Constant Contact, which is a mailing service. And I said, well, because they're owned by EIG, I would stay away. Do you know, I got Facebook messages from 5 Constant Contact Canadian reps telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. and I wish the conversation had gone public. And one was somebody who's close in my circles. They basically said, I want nothing to do with you. And my response, that's okay. But even with a negative reaction, that you're actually getting your message out there, because I had multiple reactions.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is, what people forget is it acts like a filter. Yeah. You want to filter out I don't want to say junk, but let's say, you're panning for gold, though I've never done it. It's probably a bad analogy, but you want to find the gold. Don't worry about the other stuff that falls away. You want to be able to find the gold, and let your message be your filter that either turns people away because you know what, they weren't the right fit anyway, and just brings in the good stuff, brings in the good ones.
Yeah. And along with that, I would say too, when you meet with prospective clients, and it has to do with the right fit comment, is I've actually walked away from meetings and said, I don't care what this person offers me. I'm not working with them. I've done that. And that, for a lot of entrepreneurs, is a tough pill to swallow. And I've actually said, I've had clients come to me and say, I'll pay you double your normal rate. And I'll say, I don't want it. I don't need it. Because it's going to be a headache. It's going to be a hassle. And I've made the mistake in past of actually overpricing my services to get rid of people, and they buy it anyway. I've done that. And it's like, really?
You just have to say no.
Yeah, so now I just say no.
You know what? It's true. It's so not worth it. And I think, especially for people who are starting up or trying to grow their business and they're not quite where they want to be, desperation is a terrible fuel.
Yeah.
And if you really need the money, it's hard to say no, but just work harder on defining your brand and getting those ideal clients in your backyard.
No question. Is there anything else you want to add to that conversation, or anything else we've talked about today?
I want to encourage anybody, if you are following your dream, if you're in business for yourself, expect that it's going to be all over the place. Expect there are highs, great days where you're like, I got the world by the tail. And then there are days where you're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. But that's normal. So, I just really want to encourage people, keep going at it, but don't stand still. If there's things that you don't know how to do, learn how to do it or get help doing it. And never give up your life to run your business, because when you're 100 years old sitting in that rocking chair, you'll look back and you'll have a lot of regrets, and it's not worth it. So keep everything in balance and enjoy what you're doing, because this is a choice. Nobody's making you do it. So make sure you're doing things that you really, really love, and just say no to the stuff that you don't, because the good stuff will come.
I would agree with that. And the other tip I'd throw out there to go with it is, especially when it comes to entrepreneurs and contracts and stuff like that, take a week and watch 5 episodes of Judge Judy on TV. And watch Judge Judy, and you will realize as an entrepreneur the reason you should have a written contract. and that's all I say there. I mean, take the time, try it, and then realize what she says to people, and kind of move on from there. So.
Yeah, I second that. If you don't have a contract, get a contract. That's what I'll say.
That one quickly. So thanks for your time today, Margie. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, well, right now I am rebranding my site. So my site is going to be down for a few days longer, but that depends on when you're listening. Just head on over to margieanalise.com. Yes, Rob, I have my name as my brand right now. It's MargieAnalise.com. Or you can reach me at margieanalise.com. If you want to email me, you need help with branding, you need help getting everything in balance and enjoying your life while you build your business, I'm your girl. So head on over, we can chat, and just keep going, keep at it, and I'm here as a resource if you need help.
Thanks, Margie. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Rob. It's been fun. Thanks so much for having me as a guest.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening to the SDM Interview Show. This podcast is a production of StunningDigitalMarketing.com, the agency that can help you with your web design, WordPress security, and digital marketing needs. Please subscribe to this podcast. This podcast can be found on Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and more. Please don't miss the next edition. This podcast comes out every Thursday for your listening enjoyment. Until next time, please keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.